Imagine this. The sun is blazing down on the endless plains, your horse's hooves pounding the hard-packed earth, your stomach grumbling, and danger lurking around every bend. You are a cowboy in the Old West. How did these rugged men survive the endless rides, the threat of bandits, and meals that would make most people gag? Let's saddle up and find out. The life of a cowboy on the American frontier was a blend of adventure, danger, and relentless toil. While popular culture often portrays cowboys as carefree heroes riding across endless plains under wide-open skies, the reality was far more grueling and demanding. Most cowboys were young men, often in their late teens or early 20s, who left their families behind to seek work on cattle drives stretching hundreds of miles. These young men were frequently drawn from diverse backgrounds. Some were immigrants from Europe seeking opportunity. Others were African American or Mexican vaqueros, whose families had long traditions of working with livestock. And still others were native-born Americans whose livelihoods depended on mastering the land and its challenges. Regardless of their origins, all shared a life dictated by the cattle, the trail, and the unforgiving environment around them. A typical cattle drive could last for weeks, sometimes even months, depending on the route and the demands of the ranches or railheads where the cattle were to be delivered. Early mornings were the rule rather than the exception. Cowboys were expected to rise well before sunrise, often while it was still dark, to tend to the animals, prepare breakfast, and ensure that everything was ready for the day ahead. Their workday could begin at dawn and stretch into the late evening, leaving little time for rest or leisure. Riding for hours on end, sometimes covering 20 or 30 miles in a single day, was a test of both endurance and patience. Unlike the romanticized gallop seen in films, much of this riding involved careful maneuvering, keeping the herd together, guiding cattle through rough terrain, and maintaining a pace that would prevent injury to the animals. Every mile brought new challenges, from navigating rivers and steep ridges, to dealing with sudden storms or unexpected encounters with wildlife. Weather was an ever-present factor shaping the cowboy's existence. In the hot, dry plains of Texas, summer heat could be relentless, with temperatures soaring well above 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Water sources were often scarce, and cowboys had to be vigilant about hydration, not only for themselves but for the herd as well. Dust was another constant companion, coating clothing, faces, and horses' coats, making every breath a little more difficult and every task more exhausting. In contrast, winters could bring bitter cold, with temperatures dropping below freezing and blizzards that turned the landscape into a frozen wilderness. Cowboys needed to be prepared for sudden shifts in weather, carrying blankets, warm clothing, and extra provisions when possible, and always staying alert for signs of danger that the elements themselves might pose. The bond between a cowboy and his horse was central to survival on the trail. Horses were not mere tools, they were partners, companions, and often a cowboy's most valuable asset. Maintaining the health and stamina of a horse required careful attention to feeding, watering, and rest. Cowboys learned to recognize subtle signs of discomfort or illness in their mounts, understanding that a tired or injured horse could compromise the entire journey. They developed skills in grooming, shoeing, and basic veterinary care, often improvising treatments in the field when necessary. A cowboy's ability to control and communicate with his horse could mean the difference between safely guiding a herd and encountering chaos or injury. Horses, in turn, were trained to respond to commands quickly and reliably, navigating narrow trails, steep inclines, and unexpected obstacles with a level of intelligence and trust that was indispensable on long drives. Beyond the physical challenges, life on the trail demanded mental resilience. Cowboys often faced long stretches of solitude, punctuated by brief periods of interaction with fellow riders. The monotony of the plains, broken only by the movement of cattle and the occasional encounter with other travelers, tested patience and resolve. Long hours of riding required not only endurance but concentration. A single mistake, misjudging a river crossing, spooking the herd, or misreading the land, could have disastrous consequences. Cowboys developed an acute awareness of their environment, learning to read the terrain, anticipate weather changes, and understand the behavior of the animals they were tending. This knowledge, often gained through trial and error, was essential for both the success of the drive and the safety of everyone involved. Daily routines were dictated by the needs of the herd and the demands of the trail. Mornings typically began with waking before sunrise, saddling horses, and rounding up cattle for the day's journey. Breakfast was often simple but functional, designed to provide energy for long hours of exertion. Meals were taken on the move whenever possible, with cowboys eating small portions of dried or preserved foods that could withstand the rigors of travel. Hardtack biscuits, salted meats, beans, and coffee were staples, and while they were far from gourmet, they provided the necessary sustenance. The Chuckwagon, a mobile kitchen that traveled with the herd, was the hub of food preparation, often managed by a cook who was skilled in making the most of limited supplies. These cooks were indispensable, turning whatever ingredients were available into meals that could sustain the men and maintain morale. Cattle drives themselves were complex operations requiring coordination and cooperation among the cowboys. Herds had to be kept together, with careful attention paid to strays, injured animals, and potential predators. The pace of the drive had to be managed, balancing the need to cover distance with the need to preserve the health and strength of the herd. Cowboys took turns riding lead, flanking, and rear positions, ensuring that the cattle moved smoothly and efficiently. Communication among riders was often subtle, relying on signals, whistles, or calls that conveyed instructions without startling the animals. Each cowboy had responsibilities beyond mere riding. Some were tasked with scouting ahead for water and pasture, while others managed the cattle at night or maintained equipment and gear. Social dynamics on the trail were shaped by necessity and camaraderie. Cowboys often formed tight-knit groups, relying on mutual trust and cooperation for survival. Friendships were forged under the pressures of long days, shared hardships, and the constant presence of danger. Respect was earned through skill, reliability, and courage, and the bonds among men on the trail were often stronger than those formed in towns or cities. At the same time, the cowboy's life was not free from tension or conflict. Disagreements could arise over leadership, strategy, or disputes within the herd, and managing these conflicts required diplomacy and an understanding of group dynamics. Despite occasional disagreements, the shared experience of the trail fostered a sense of unity and mutual dependence that was essential for the success of the drive. Physical labor was relentless. Cowboys often had to dismount and work directly with the cattle, using ropes and lassos to brand, corral, or separate animals as needed. This work required not only strength and agility, but also precision and timing. A misstep could result in injury, loss of cattle, or even death. Long hours in the saddle caused blisters, sore muscles, and joint pain, but there was little opportunity for rest. Cowboys learned to endure discomfort, developing resilience and toughness that became central to their identity. Their clothing and gear, from sturdy boots and gloves to wide-brimmed hats and durable jackets, were designed to provide protection and functionality, enabling them to work under harsh conditions while minimizing risk. Education and knowledge for cowboys came from experience and mentorship rather than formal schooling. Young men learned from seasoned riders who passed down techniques, survival strategies, and stories of past drives. Instruction included handling horses, navigating trails, identifying edible plants, hunting game, and even basic first aid. Knowledge of the land was paramount. Cowboys needed to recognize landmarks, understand the behavior of rivers and weather patterns, and anticipate hazards that could disrupt the herd. These skills were honed over time, with mistakes serving as harsh but valuable lessons that shaped competence and confidence on the trail. Cultural influences also played a role in shaping the cowboy's life. Music, storytelling, and traditions from various communities blended along the trail. Cowboys sang songs to pass the time, tell stories of their adventures, and maintain morale during long nights around the campfire. Humor, superstition, and ritual were all part of the fabric of trail life, offering comfort and a sense of identity in an often unforgiving environment. Shared experiences of danger, exhaustion, and triumph fostered a culture of resilience and mutual respect, which helped sustain men over months of arduous travel. Despite the hardships, cowboys developed a sense of freedom and connection to the land that was unmatched in other professions. The vast open plains, the rhythm of the herd, and the reliance on skill and instinct created a life that was demanding but deeply rewarding. The cowboy's daily existence required a blend of physical ability, mental acuity, and emotional resilience.
Success on the trail was measured not just in the safe delivery of cattle, but in the ability to endure adversity, navigate uncertainty, and maintain the well-being of both men and animals under trying conditions.
Cowboys also had to contend with the social and economic realities of the frontier. Payment for work was often modest, and employment could be seasonal or uncertain. Many cowboys sought work on multiple drives each year, moving from ranch to ranch as opportunities arose. The profession attracted individuals seeking independence, adventure, or a means to make a living when other options were limited. The frontier itself was changing during the late 19th century, with railroads expanding and settlements growing, gradually altering the landscape in which cowboys operated. Nevertheless, for those willing to endure its challenges, the trail offered not only work, but a chance to assert skill, resilience, and courage in an environment that demanded the very best of those who lived there. Survival on the trail was as much about foresight and preparation as it was about immediate skill. Cowboys carried essential tools, often including knives, ropes, spare horseshoes, and basic medical supplies. They learned to anticipate problems before they occurred, whether it was ensuring enough water for the herd, repairing gear before it broke, or scouting ahead to avoid obstacles or predators. Attention to detail and proactive problem-solving were crucial, as a single oversight could jeopardize days of hard work or place lives at risk. Over time, cowboys developed routines and strategies that maximized efficiency, reduced risk, and increased the likelihood of a successful drive. The cowboy's relationship with the natural world was intimate and multifaceted. Understanding the behavior of cattle, horses, and wildlife was essential. Knowledge of plant life, water sources, and terrain allowed cowboys to navigate and survive in regions that might have otherwise been hostile. They observed subtle signs in the environment, changes in the wind that might indicate approaching weather, tracks of predators, or the behavior of their herd as a signal of danger or illness. This attentiveness fostered a profound respect for the land and its rhythms, a knowledge that was critical for survival and that distinguished experienced cowboys from novices. In conclusion, the life of a cowboy on the trail was one of relentless challenge, requiring endurance, skill, and adaptability. The young men who took on this life faced long hours, harsh weather, scarce food, and constant risk. Yet they developed a culture of resilience, camaraderie, and expertise that allowed them to thrive under extraordinary circumstances. Their days were filled with riding, tending cattle, maintaining equipment, and navigating the uncertainties of the frontier. Success depended on a combination of physical stamina, mental alertness, and social cohesion. While romanticized in stories and films, the true cowboy's life was grounded in practicality, hard work, and an intimate understanding of both animals and the land. Through these qualities, cowboys survived, adapted, and left an enduring legacy that continues to capture the imagination and respect of generations. Life on the trail was not merely a test of endurance against the elements or long hours in the saddle. It was a constant struggle against human threats that lurked across the vast stretches of the American frontier. Bandits, outlaws, and opportunists were part of the fabric of the Old West, a region often lawless and sprawling, where justice was inconsistent and the rule of law sometimes distant or delayed. Cowboys, despite their focus on cattle and the trail, had to remain vigilant at all times, aware that danger could emerge without warning. The threat of robbery, ambush, or violence was ever present, and surviving these encounters required a combination of courage, quick thinking, and experience honed by months or even years on the trail. Outlaws and bandits in the Old West came in many forms, each with their own methods and motives. Some were solitary thieves, skilled in stealth and ambush, who roamed the plains or used hidden trails to intercept travelers or isolated cowboys. Others were part of organized gangs, notorious for their raids on stagecoaches, small settlements, or unsuspecting cattle drives. Unlike in more settled regions, law enforcement on the frontier was often scarce. Sheriffs and marshals might patrol towns, but miles of open prairie separated communities, leaving cowboys to face threats largely on their own. In this environment, understanding the behavior and tactics of outlaws was as important as learning to ride, rope, or handle a herd of cattle. Cowboys were trained to recognize signs of danger long before any attack occurred. They learned to observe tracks on the trail, notice disturbances in the environment, and interpret subtle signals that could indicate the presence of strangers. For example, unusual campfires, unexpected movements on ridges, or evidence of horses could serve as early warning signs. Cowboys also relied on communication within their group. Riding in pairs or small clusters provided not only assistance with herding cattle but also a measure of security. The saying that a lone cowboy was vulnerable was not mere folklore, it reflected a harsh reality. Together, cowboys could watch each other's backs, coordinate defensive maneuvers, and respond effectively if threatened. Weapons were a crucial part of a cowboy's preparedness. Revolvers were standard issue for most trail hands, with 6-shot cylinders providing a means of self-defense. Some cowboys carried rifles or shotguns, particularly when anticipating more serious threats or in regions known for outlaw activity. However, survival did not always depend on firearms alone. The terrain, knowledge of the land, and the ability to anticipate movement were just as vital. A cowboy who could ride quickly, position himself advantageously, and use cover effectively had a far better chance of evading or surviving an encounter with bandits than one who relied solely on his gun. Firing a weapon recklessly could provoke an ambush or escalate a situation, so skill, judgment, and restraint were as critical as marksmanship. Many encounters with outlaws never escalated to violence because cowboys learned to avoid them altogether. Scouting ahead was a routine part of trail life, and experienced riders could identify potentially dangerous areas, such as narrow canyons, river crossings, or isolated stretches of prairie that made ambush likely. When possible, cowboys would choose safer routes, even if it meant longer rides or more challenging terrain. Stealth, discretion, and awareness often prevented conflicts from occurring in the first place. Survival depended not just on confronting danger, but on knowing when to evade it. Trust among fellow cowboys was another cornerstone of safety on the trail. Each man had to rely on others not only for assistance with the herd but also for protection. Cowboys formed an informal hierarchy based on experience, skill, and knowledge of the land. Leaders or trail bosses would organize riding patterns, assign tasks, and establish protocols for defense. Communication, both verbal and nonverbal, was essential. A glance, whistle, or gesture could convey warnings or instructions, without startling the cattle or revealing intentions to potential threats. This tight coordination allowed cowboys to react as a unit rather than as isolated individuals when confronted by danger. The culture of banditry itself was deeply intertwined with the frontier's geography and economy. Bandits were often drawn to the same cattle routes and railheads as cowboys because they knew that opportunities for theft or extortion were abundant there. The movement of herds across open plains presented targets that were mobile yet predictable in their general path. Some outlaws specialized in rustling, targeting unattended cattle to sell them elsewhere, while others sought cash or supplies from towns, settlements, or passing travelers. The knowledge that such threats existed shaped nearly every decision a cowboy made, from the timing of travel to the choice of camping sites. Cowboys developed strategies specifically designed to counter these threats. Nights were particularly risky, as darkness provided cover for ambushes. Cowboys would take turns standing watch, ensuring that someone was always alert to approaching danger. Camps were often set in defensible positions, with natural barriers like ridges, rivers, or trees used to create protective perimeters. Horses were secured and positioned so they could be quickly mounted in case of an emergency. The chuckwagon, which served as the hub of food and supplies, was often placed centrally and surrounded by the herd, creating a natural buffer. These precautions, while seemingly mundane, were essential to survival. Beyond physical preparedness, cowboys also relied on psychological readiness. Encounters with outlaws could be tense, unpredictable, and frightening, and maintaining composure was crucial. A cowboy who panicked or acted impulsively was far more likely to be injured or fail to protect the herd. Experience, therefore, became a survival tool. Younger cowboys learned from veterans who had faced real threats, absorbing lessons on how to react, how to negotiate danger, and how to read human behavior in high-stress situations. Storytelling around the campfire often reinforced these lessons, with cautionary tales of ambushes, clever escapes, and failed confrontations serving as both entertainment and practical instruction. Some cowboys encountered outlaws not on the open trail, but within settlements or near railheads where cattle were gathered for shipment. These locations could be crowded and chaotic, providing both opportunities and hazards. Cowboys had to navigate social interactions carefully, balancing toughness and diplomacy. A reputation for reliability and courage could deter potential attackers, while a misstep could make a cowboy a target for theft or intimidation. Understanding social cues, reading character, and projecting confidence were all part of the unspoken education required to survive both on the open trail and in town. Historical accounts provide vivid examples of the constant threat posed by outlaws and the clever ways cowboys adapted. For instance, in Texas during the late 1800s, gangs of rustlers became notorious for raiding large herds, sometimes driving stolen cattle hundreds of miles to sell in distant markets. Cowboys responded by developing intricate routines for moving and guarding cattle, often dividing the herd into smaller groups, rotating positions, and establishing advance scouts. The vigilance required was immense, and even with careful planning, encounters with outlaws could turn deadly. Yet these challenges forged resilience, resourcefulness, and a deep understanding of the land and its risks. Bandits were not always motivated purely by greed. Some were outlaws seeking revenge, escaping justice, or exploiting the lawless environment of the frontier. Their unpredictability made them especially dangerous. Cowboys had to remain adaptable, prepared for sudden attacks or changes in circumstances. Even the presence of a seemingly friendly traveler could pose a risk if the person harbored ulterior motives. This constant uncertainty required cowboys to cultivate both skepticism and quick decision-making, ensuring they could react effectively under pressure. The cowboy's relationship with firearms was therefore complex. Guns were tools of protection, but they were not relied upon exclusively. Cowboys understood that speed, strategy, and observation often trumped firepower. Ambushes were countered through mobility, positioning, and coordination rather than sheer force. In some cases, evasion was preferable to confrontation, allowing the herd and the men to continue safely without unnecessary risk. This balance of offense, defense, and avoidance reflected the practical intelligence that defined successful cowboys. Some cowboys became legendary not for their skill with a rope or their ability to drive cattle, but for their capacity to handle threats from human adversaries. These men were admired for their calm under pressure, tactical ingenuity, and courage. Their reputations often preceded them, deterring potential troublemakers and providing an added layer of security for the groups they traveled with. Respect was earned through actions as much as words, and a cowboy who could maintain control during an encounter with outlaws gained both status and trust among his peers. In addition to immediate physical threats, cowboys also faced long-term risks from the presence of lawless individuals. Outlaws could influence the regions they traveled through, disrupting supply lines, stealing livestock, or intimidating local settlers. Cowboys had to consider not only the dangers of a particular moment, but also the broader context of traveling through contested or unstable areas. Strategic planning, knowledge of local conditions, and intelligence gathering became critical skills, allowing cowboys to navigate both geography and human threats with greater confidence. Ultimately, surviving the threat of bandits and outlaws was not about heroics or reckless bravery. It was about preparation, observation, and disciplined response. Cowboys learned to read both the land and the people around them, understanding patterns, anticipating danger, and responding with precision. They developed a combination of practical skills, social awareness, and psychological resilience that enabled them to operate successfully in an environment where danger could strike at any moment. This combination of skill, strategy, and adaptability allowed cowboys not only to survive, but to thrive on the trail, turning a potentially deadly profession into a symbol of endurance, courage, and ingenuity. Through experience, observation, and mentorship, cowboys became adept at navigating a landscape where danger was ever present. They learned to combine mobility, teamwork, vigilance, and knowledge of firearms to maintain safety for themselves and the herds they tended. Their daily routines incorporated constant checks, strategic positioning, and planning for contingencies. Every ride, every night at camp, and every river crossing involved careful thought and anticipation of potential threats. Survival was never guaranteed, but the preparation, skill, and cohesion of cowboys made it far more likely in the face of bandits, outlaws, and lawless territories. Cowboys proved that resilience, intelligence, and cooperation could overcome even the harshest human dangers. Food on the trail was never simply a matter of taste or preference. It was a question of survival. For cowboys driving cattle across hundreds of miles of open plains, deserts, and rugged landscapes, meals were often irregular, monotonous, and sometimes downright unappetizing. The demands of life on the trail made it impossible to carry large amounts of fresh food, and preserving supplies was an ongoing challenge. Cowboys were forced to rely on staples that could endure weeks without spoiling, as well as whatever wild resources they could find along the way. The trail diet was functional, not luxurious, and it required cowboys to develop both a tolerance for tough or questionable food and a creativity in preparing it under difficult circumstances. One of the most basic and common staples of a cowboy's diet was hardtack. Hardtack was a simple biscuit made of flour, water, and sometimes salt, baked until it was extremely hard and dry. Its durability made it ideal for long cattle drives, as it could last for months without molding. However, its texture was notoriously unforgiving. Biting into hardtack without soaking it in water, coffee, or stew often resulted in chipped teeth or sore gums. Despite its limitations, hardtack was valued for its portability, its long shelf life, and the energy it provided. Cowboys often used it as a base for meals, breaking it into smaller pieces and soaking it in liquid to make it edible, or crumbling it into beans or coffee to create a filling dish. It was the backbone of trail sustenance, a constant reminder of the practicality required for survival on the plains. Salted meat, often referred to as jerky or simply salt pork, was another essential part of the cowboy diet. Fresh meat was rarely available except when cattle could be hunted or killed along the way, so preservation through salting was key. Salted beef or pork provided protein and calories, but it was often tough, chewy, and heavily salted. Cowboys quickly developed a tolerance for these flavors and textures, understanding that nourishment mattered more than culinary pleasure. Meat that was partially spoiled or oversalted could sometimes be softened in boiling water, turned into stews, or paired with beans or bread to make it more palatable. Though the food was far from appetizing by modern standards, it provided the energy needed for long rides and labor-intensive work. Beans were another cornerstone of the cowboy diet. Dried beans were inexpensive, easy to transport, and provided essential protein and calories. Cooking beans required a fire or a stove, patience and water, which could be scarce on long drives. Cowboys often combined beans with salted meat, forming the basis of hearty stews that could sustain the herd hands for hours of riding and labor. The flavor of these meals was simple, but their nutritional value was crucial. Beans also had the advantage of lasting for long periods, unlike fresh vegetables or fruits, which were rarely available on the open trail. Coffee was more than a beverage, it was a lifeline. Brewed over open flames in cast-iron pots, coffee provided warmth, comfort, and alertness. It was a daily ritual that helped cowboys wake up before sunrise, endure long hours in the saddle, and maintain morale during the monotonous stretches of the trail. Coffee was often consumed black or with a small amount of sugar, but in many cases it was boiled until strong enough to mask the flavor of dust or other impurities. The ritual of drinking coffee, sometimes in groups around a campfire, also offered moments of camaraderie and shared experience, providing emotional sustenance in addition to physical nourishment. The chuckwagon played a central role in feeding cowboys and managing trail rations. Invented in the late 19th century by Charles Goodnight, the chuckwagon was essentially a mobile kitchen, equipped with storage for food, cooking utensils, and supplies. The cook, often a seasoned veteran of the trail, was responsible for preparing meals, rationing ingredients, and ensuring that every cowboy received enough sustenance to maintain energy and morale. Being a chuckwagon cook required skill, creativity, and an understanding of the limitations of trail food. A good cook could turn beans, salted meat, and hardtack into filling meals that kept cowboys healthy and satisfied, while a poor cook could cause illness or lower morale. The cook was often revered on the trail, not only for culinary skill but for their practical role in survival. Fresh food was a rare luxury, usually limited to moments when cowboys could hunt game or access local settlements. Small animals, birds, or fish might supplement the diet, providing much-needed protein and variety. However, hunting required time, skill, and sometimes risk, as cowboys could be delayed from driving the herd or face dangerous terrain while searching for game. Wild fruits, nuts, or edible plants were occasionally foraged, but knowledge of local flora was essential to avoid poisonous varieties. Cowboys who were skilled at identifying and using wild food had a significant advantage, as even a small supplement could improve nutrition and morale. Despite these efforts, the reality of the cowboy diet was harsh. Meals were often bland, repetitive, and lacking in essential vitamins and nutrients. Malnutrition was a risk on long drives, and digestive issues were common, particularly when consuming spoiled meat or hard-to-digest foods. Cowboys had to build tolerance not only to the taste and texture of trail food but also to its potential effects on the body. Eating quickly and continuing work immediately afterward was common, as stopping for extended meals was often impractical during the demands of a long drive. This pragmatic approach to food highlighted the broader survival mindset of cowboys, who prioritized functionality and endurance over comfort or culinary pleasure. Cowboys also developed resourcefulness in making the most of limited food supplies. Leftovers were rarely wasted, and creativity in preparation was essential. Hardtack might be crumbled into soups or stews, beans could be flavored with whatever seasonings were available, and meat could be boiled, fried, or roasted over an open fire. Spices and flavorings were scarce, so cooks often relied on smoke from the fire, the natural flavors of meat and vegetables, and careful timing to enhance meals. Even small variations, such as adding wild herbs or changing cooking methods, could make a significant difference in palatability and morale. In this way, cowboys learned to stretch ingredients, adapt to scarcity, and make every meal count. Food on the trail was not only about survival but also about maintaining morale and social cohesion. Meals were often shared experiences, with cowboys gathering around the chuckwagon or a campfire to eat, talk, and rest. These moments provided brief respite from the constant labor of riding and herding cattle, offering time for storytelling, singing, and camaraderie. The social aspect of eating was crucial in sustaining a sense of community, reducing loneliness, and reinforcing the bonds among men who spent weeks or months in close proximity. In many ways, the shared meal became a symbol of collective endurance, a reminder that survival depended not only on individual skill, but on the cooperation and support of the group. Even when food was unappetizing or spoiled, cowboys adapted, stomachs hardened, palates adjusted, and tolerance developed over time. The ability to eat meat that others might find rotten or hardtack that could fracture teeth became a mark of toughness and experience. Humor and storytelling often mitigated discomfort, with cowboys joking about the quality of food or recounting tales of particularly terrible meals. These narratives, passed down around campfires, reinforced identity, culture, and the practical knowledge necessary for life on the trail. Eating, in this sense, became an exercise in resilience, endurance, and adaptation. The challenges of the cowboy diet extended beyond taste and nutrition to include logistical and environmental considerations. Food had to be stored carefully to prevent spoilage, protected from pests, and transported efficiently. Chuckwagons were designed for maximum functionality, with compartments for dry goods, meat, and cooking tools. Cowboys learned to organize rations, ration water, and plan meals according to the availability of resources and the length of the drive. They also had to consider the needs of the herd, as well-fed cattle were essential to the success of the journey, and any delay in food or water for the animals could have cascading effects on both schedule and safety. Historical records and diaries from cowboys illustrate the realities of trail food vividly. Some accounts describe meals consisting entirely of beans and salted meat for days on end, with little variation or relief. Others recount the occasional luxury of fresh milk, eggs, or game, highlighting how rare such opportunities were. Many cowboys noted that coffee was the most consistently satisfying element of their diet, providing warmth, alertness, and a sense of routine. These first-hand accounts underscore the balance between necessity and adaptation that characterized the cowboy diet, revealing a lifestyle in which endurance, practicality, and ingenuity were as important as any specific food item. In addition to physical sustenance, food provided psychological comfort. After long days in the saddle, the smell of a cooking fire, the sight of a meal prepared by the chuckwagon cook, or the taste of warm coffee could lift spirits and reinforce determination. Even the most monotonous or unpalatable meals could take on symbolic significance, representing a sense of stability, predictability, and survival in an otherwise unpredictable environment. Cowboys came to appreciate the small comforts of trail cuisine, understanding that sustenance was as much about mental resilience as it was about nutrition. Ultimately, the cowboy diet was a reflection of the broader challenges of frontier life. It required toughness, creativity, and a willingness to endure discomfort for the sake of survival. Meals were practical, functional, and designed to keep men and animals alive over long distances, often in harsh and unpredictable conditions. Cowboys learned to appreciate what they had, make the most of limited resources, and adapt to whatever circumstances the trail presented. The endurance built through this diet, both physical and psychological, was a cornerstone of life on the trail, shaping the character, skills, and resilience of the men who became emblematic of the American West. Through trial, error, ingenuity, cowboys transformed limited, basic, and sometimes rotten ingredients into meals that sustained them through grueling cattle drives. They learned to value practicality over pleasure, nutrition over flavor, and endurance over comfort. Their diet was not just a matter of survival. It was a testament to adaptability, resourcefulness, and the relentless spirit of the frontier. By mastering the challenges of trail food, cowboys demonstrated an essential truth about life on the plains. Survival depended on preparation, skill, and the ability to thrive even when conditions were far from ideal. Every hardtack, every salted meat biscuit, every cup of strong coffee became a small victory against the hardships of trail life, sustaining cowboys in their relentless pursuit of duty, adventure, and survival. Life on the trail demanded more than courage or a steady hand. It demanded endurance, resourcefulness, and an ability to adapt to circumstances that were often unpredictable and unforgiving. For a cowboy, surviving months of travel across the open plains, deserts, and mountain passes was not simply a matter of skill in riding or roping. It was a test of physical stamina, mental resilience, and ingenuity in the face of constant challenges. Long rides, blistering heat, freezing nights, injuries, and the ever-present threat of mishaps or accidents created a reality in which only those who could adapt and improvise could endure the hardships of trail life. Physical endurance was perhaps the most obvious requirement. Cowboys spent hours in the saddle each day, often covering 20 or 30 miles over rough terrain. Unlike modern horses accustomed to short rides or controlled conditions, the animals on the trail were strong, but could also become tired, injured, or stubborn. Cowboys needed not only strength and balance, but also intimate knowledge of their horses' capabilities. Riding for hours in direct sunlight or bitter cold, maintaining control over a herd, and responding to the unpredictable movements of cattle demanded every ounce of physical energy. Blisters, sore muscles, joint pain, and exhaustion were common, yet the demands of the herd never paused for discomfort. Sleep, too, was often limited. Nights spent under the stars, with little shelter, made rest incomplete and sometimes interrupted by weather, predators, or the necessity to maintain a watch over the herd. Endurance extended beyond the purely physical. Mental resilience was equally vital. The monotony of the plains, broken only by the occasional challenge of navigation or an encounter with wildlife or humans, could wear on a cowboy's focus and morale. Riding for hours, repeating the same patterns of controlling the herd, observing the terrain, and maintaining vigilance required concentration and the ability to suppress fatigue and frustration. Mental endurance involved not only keeping attention but also making quick, accurate decisions under pressure, choosing the safest path across difficult terrain, responding to a sudden illness or injury among the cattle, or deciding how to handle a human threat demanded a combination of calm judgment and quick thinking. Mistakes could result in injury, loss of animals, or even death, so the ability to maintain mental clarity under stress was as important as physical strength. Resourcefulness was the other pillar of survival. The cowboy's life was shaped by scarcity, scarce food, limited water, rudimentary medical supplies, and minimal tools. Each obstacle demanded practical solutions and improvisation. If a saddle broke, a cowboy had to repair it with leather strips, rope, or makeshift stitching. If a horse was injured, the rider might have to improvise bandages, splints, or poultices using natural materials. Water was always a concern. Knowing where rivers, streams or watering holes could be found required careful observation and knowledge passed down from more experienced riders. In drought conditions, cowboys had to ration water, share it among the herd, and plan routes that would prevent dehydration for both men and animals. This blend of improvisation, foresight, and hands-on skill defined the resourcefulness that allowed cowboys to survive where others might falter. Endurance and resourcefulness were also tested by injury and illness. Blisters, cuts, and sprains were common, but access to medical care was extremely limited. Cowboys relied on home remedies, practical experience, and basic first aid techniques. A cut might be cleaned with water and herbal antiseptics, a sprain wrapped with cloth or leather, and a fever managed with rest and hydration. Knowledge of medicinal plants was invaluable. Certain herbs were used to reduce pain, treat infections, or soothe stomach ailments. In many cases, the cowboy's ability to care for himself or his companions determined whether minor injuries became debilitating or life-threatening. These skills were often passed down orally, learned through trial and error, or shared by more experienced members of the trail crew. The harshness of the environment demanded a keen understanding of weather and terrain. Cowboys learned to read the sky, noticing changes in clouds, wind direction, or temperature that might indicate storms, drought, or extreme cold. Navigating rivers, canyons, hills, and deserts required careful observation and planning. Certain paths were avoided because of natural hazards or the risk of cattle getting stuck or injured. Cowboys had to know when to push forward to maintain the herd schedule and when to slow down to conserve energy and protect animals from exhaustion or heat stroke. This delicate balance between speed and safety was a constant concern, requiring foresight and strategic thinking at every stage of the journey. Resourcefulness also extended to problem-solving with minimal supplies. Tools were few and had to serve multiple purposes. Ropes, knives, and leather straps were essential, used for everything from restraining cattle to repairing equipment or improvising shelter. Food had to be stretched carefully, making every ounce count, and cowboys often turned to local plants or game to supplement their diet. Fire-making was a critical skill. Fires provided warmth, a means to cook meals, and a way to signal others or ward off predators. Knowing how to build a fire in rain, snow, or dry grasslands was crucial, and cowboys often carried flint, tinder, and basic tools to ensure they could make fire even in challenging conditions. Horses were central to both endurance and resourcefulness. A cowboy's survival depended heavily on his mount, making horsemanship a crucial skill. Riders needed to know how to manage their horse's stamina, feed and water it properly, and recognize signs of exhaustion or illness. Horses were not merely tools, they were partners. Understanding their behavior, anticipating reactions, and maintaining their health was as important as maintaining one's own. Cowboys often rotated horses when possible, used pacing strategies to prevent fatigue, and improvised solutions when injuries occurred. The bond between cowboy and horse was a symbiotic one, with survival hinging on mutual understanding, care, and trust. Cowboys also had to manage the herd itself, a task that required constant attention, strategic thinking, and adaptive behavior. Cattle could be unpredictable, easily spooked by sudden noises, weather changes, or the presence of predators. Maintaining the cohesion of a herd over miles of open country was a complex task. Cowboys needed to position themselves strategically, use signals and whistles, and coordinate with fellow riders to guide the herd efficiently. Herd management also demanded foresight. Identifying grazing areas, water sources, and safe resting spots ensured that cattle remained healthy and prevented unnecessary losses. Every decision about herd movement, pacing, or placement required judgment, experience, and adaptability. Survival on the trail was as much about social resourcefulness as it was about physical endurance. Cowboys often relied on teamwork and mutual support to navigate challenges. Experience and hierarchy mattered, with seasoned riders mentoring younger men, sharing knowledge, and guiding decisions during crises. Cooperation was essential during emergencies, whether a herd was threatened by predators, weather, or human interference. Cowboys had to communicate effectively, anticipate each other's actions, and act in concert to prevent disaster. Social cohesion was an invisible but critical component of endurance, providing emotional support and practical coordination. Endurance extended to the mental and emotional realm as well. Long days and nights, isolation, and the monotony of the trail could erode morale. Cowboys used humor, song, storytelling, and camaraderie to maintain spirits and mental resilience. Singing around campfires, telling tales of past drives, or sharing practical advice fostered a sense of belonging and purpose. Emotional endurance was essential not only for individual well-being but also for group cohesion, as morale affected performance, cooperation, and the ability to respond to challenges effectively. Cowboys often faced situations that demanded rapid problem-solving under pressure. A river crossing might present a logistical puzzle, requiring careful planning to ensure both cattle and horses passed safely. Sudden thunderstorms could flood low-lying areas, forcing riders to find higher ground quickly. Equipment might break unexpectedly, necessitating on-the-spot repairs. Each challenge demanded a combination of creativity, skill, and decisiveness. Successful cowboys were those who could think quickly, anticipate problems before they occurred, and adapt solutions to the resources available. In this way, endurance and resourcefulness were inseparable. Survival required both the physical and mental capacity to endure and the practical intelligence to solve problems creatively. The ability to anticipate challenges also played a role in psychological endurance. Cowboys developed an awareness of patterns in the land, weather, and animal behavior, allowing them to make informed decisions and reduce risks. Recognizing signs of danger, predicting how the herd might react, or anticipating obstacles allowed cowboys to act proactively rather than reactively. This foresight minimized unnecessary stress and conserved energy, both physical and mental, contributing to the long-term sustainability of life on the trail. The frontier environment also demanded ingenuity and improvisation. Cowboys often had to make do with what was available, turning scraps of leather, rope, or fabric into tools, repairs, or protective gear. Makeshift solutions were common, and a successful cowboy was judged not only by skill but by creativity and adaptability. A broken wagon wheel might be reinforced with spare parts and rope, a torn saddle patched together to last the remainder of the drive, and a temporary bridge constructed to cross a stream. Resourcefulness in these situations was literally a matter of survival, preserving both life and livelihood. Cowboys also needed endurance in managing their own health and well-being. Exposure to sun, wind, dust, and rain placed constant stress on the body. Skin could be sunburned or chapped, eyes irritated by dust, and muscles fatigued from hours in the saddle. Rest and recovery were limited, and cowboys developed routines for stretching, tending to injuries, and maintaining personal hygiene as best as possible under difficult conditions. These practices were essential for sustaining performance over long periods, as neglecting minor issues could lead to serious illness or injury. Education through experience was a critical component of resourcefulness. Younger or inexperienced cowboys learned from veterans who had faced similar trials. Skills were passed down orally, through demonstration, and often through trial and error. Knowledge of terrain, animals, weather patterns, and survival techniques was invaluable, forming a cumulative wisdom that grew with every drive. Learning to endure and adapt was not simply a matter of instruction, it was a continuous process of observation, experimentation, and reflection, honed through the realities of daily life on the trail. The mental challenge of endurance was intertwined with the unpredictability of life on the trail. Cowboys had to tolerate uncertainty, make decisions without complete information, and accept that sometimes outcomes were beyond their control. This acceptance was part of the psychological preparation for survival, fostering a mindset of flexibility, pragmatism, and perseverance. By cultivating both mental and physical endurance, cowboys were able to navigate the harsh realities of frontier life, maintaining functionality, safety, and efficiency under conditions that tested the limits of human capability. Ultimately, the combination of endurance and resourcefulness defined the success of a cowboy. Physical stamina allowed them to meet the demands of long rides, harsh weather, and exhausting labor. Mental resilience enabled them to remain focused, make critical decisions, and maintain morale. Practical ingenuity and problem-solving allowed them to adapt to scarcity, repair equipment, and navigate unexpected challenges. Together, these qualities created a profile of a frontier worker capable of surviving and thriving in one of the most demanding environments in American history. The cowboy's ability to endure the rigors of the trail and to resourcefully overcome obstacles was not merely a matter of survival. It was a demonstration of human adaptability, skill, and perseverance, and it became a defining characteristic of the cowboy legacy that endures in history and popular imagination. Life on the cattle trail was not meant to be faced alone. For all the skills, courage, and endurance a cowboy might possess, survival and success depended almost entirely on working together. A lone rider was vulnerable, not only to the natural challenges of the frontier, harsh weather, dangerous terrain, and unpredictable animals, but also to the constant threats posed by human adversaries, accidents, and the very nature of managing a large herd over hundreds of miles. Working together on the trail required trust, communication, shared responsibility, and an understanding of both human and animal behavior. The ability to coordinate with fellow cowboys often determined the difference between a smooth, successful drive and disaster. The structure of the cowboy team was hierarchical yet flexible. At the top was usually the trail boss, an experienced and respected leader who had the responsibility of planning the route, assigning tasks, and making critical decisions. The trail boss had to possess a combination of knowledge, experience, and authority. Their decisions affected not just the herd, but the safety and efficiency of every cowboy on the drive. Beneath the trail boss were the more experienced cowhands, who often served as deputies or lead riders, guiding groups of cattle, training younger cowboys, and helping maintain order on the trail. The remainder of the team consisted of less experienced hands who learned through observation, mentorship, and the demands of the work itself. Despite this hierarchy, flexibility was essential, as conditions on the trail could change rapidly, requiring improvisation and cooperation at all levels. Communication was a critical component of teamwork. Cowboys developed a language of gestures, whistles, and verbal calls that allowed them to coordinate movements without alarming the herd. A glance, a subtle hand signal, or a whistle could instruct riders to advance, hold position, or circle the herd. Precision and timing were vital. A miscommunication could scatter the cattle, create chaos, or even result in injury. Cowboys needed to anticipate the actions of their peers, understand the rhythm of the herd, and act in concert to maintain control. This synchronization was developed over time through shared experience, training, and a deep understanding of both the animals and their fellow riders. Herd management itself demanded teamwork. Cattle drives often involved hundreds or even thousands of animals, each with its own temperament, habits, and vulnerabilities. Keeping such a large group together while traversing long distances required careful coordination. Riders were strategically positioned around the herd, some at the front to guide direction, others on the flanks to prevent strays, and still others at the rear to push lagging animals forward. Each cowboy's role was essential. Neglecting one position could disrupt the flow of the herd, tire the animals unnecessarily, or expose them to danger. Working together in this way required mutual trust, the ability to anticipate one another's actions, and a shared commitment to the collective goal of safely delivering the herd. Nighttime on the trail presented its own unique challenges for teamwork. Cowboys often took shifts to maintain a watch, ensuring that both the herd and the camp remained safe from predators, bandits, or other hazards. This required cooperation, discipline, and reliability. A cowboy who fell asleep or neglected his watch could endanger the entire group, yet the shifts had to balance vigilance with the need for rest and recovery. Camp organization was equally important. Horses were secured, fires were maintained, and supplies were distributed according to established routines. Teamwork extended beyond immediate herd management to the broader task of survival, encompassing preparation, strategy, and shared responsibility. Camaraderie and social bonds were central to the effectiveness of teamwork. Long hours in close quarters, shared hardships, and mutual reliance fostered strong relationships among cowboys. Humor, storytelling, and song were used to build morale and maintain social cohesion. Even minor conflicts had to be managed carefully, as interpersonal friction could disrupt coordination and effectiveness. Cowboys developed unwritten codes of conduct, emphasizing respect, loyalty, and support. These social norms were reinforced by the realities of the trail, where cooperation was not merely desirable, but essential for survival. A cowboy who earned the trust and respect of his peers became a valued member of the team, while one who acted recklessly or selfishly could quickly find himself isolated and vulnerable. Resource sharing was another aspect of teamwork. On long drives, supplies were limited, and cowboys often had to share food, water, tools, and even shelter. The Chuckwagon cook played a central role in coordinating meals, ensuring that everyone had sufficient sustenance to maintain energy and morale. Water and forage for horses were carefully rationed and distributed, often requiring negotiation and collaboration among riders. The team's collective survival depended on fairness, foresight, and mutual support, reinforcing the idea that no individual could thrive independently on the trail. Mentorship and skill development were inherent in the structure of the cowboy team. Experienced riders guided newcomers, teaching them not only practical skills like roping, riding, and cattle management, but also strategies for decision-making, observation, and risk assessment. Knowledge of the land, animal behavior, weather patterns, and survival techniques was passed down orally, through demonstration, and through hands-on experience. Mentorship ensured that skills were preserved and adapted, creating a cycle of learning that strengthened the team's overall effectiveness. Newcomers quickly learned that contributing to the group's success was essential. Survival depended on competence, reliability, and the ability to integrate into the team dynamic. Flexibility was essential within the team. No plan could account for every variable encountered on the trail, and cowboys often had to adapt roles and responsibilities in response to changing circumstances. Weather could delay travel, rivers might swell, or injuries could remove a rider from duty. The ability to adjust, reassign tasks, and improvise solutions was a hallmark of successful teams. This adaptive capacity allowed cowboys to respond to emergencies, maintain herd integrity, and sustain progress even under adverse conditions. Teamwork, therefore, was dynamic, requiring constant communication, observation, and mutual understanding. Leadership within the team also played a crucial role in coordinating action. Trail bosses had to make decisions that balanced efficiency with safety, often under uncertain or rapidly changing conditions. Deputies and experienced cowboys acted as extensions of leadership, ensuring that orders were carried out, providing guidance to less experienced riders, and monitoring the herd for signs of distress or deviation. This layered approach allowed for both centralized decision-making and distributed execution, creating a system in which coordination and teamwork were embedded at every level. The effectiveness of the group often depended on the ability of leaders to inspire trust, maintain authority, and foster collaboration among diverse personalities and skill levels. Cowboys also relied on teamwork in responding to external threats. Encounters with predators, outlaws, or environmental hazards required coordinated action. A single rider could rarely fend off a dangerous animal or defend against bandits while simultaneously managing a herd. Teams could encircle the herd, create barriers, and execute strategies to protect cattle and riders alike. Cooperation allowed for quick, organized responses that minimized risk and maximized survival. The ability to work seamlessly under pressure distinguished experienced teams from less cohesive groups and was often the difference between success and disaster on the trail. Problem-solving as a team extended to logistical challenges as well. Maintaining equipment, distributing supplies, and managing fatigue required careful planning and collaboration. Cowboys coordinated the timing of travel to allow for rest, ensured that food and water were sufficient for both men and animals, and maintained the functionality of wagons, saddles, and other essential gear. Shared problem-solving reinforced mutual reliance, built trust, and enhanced efficiency, allowing the team to navigate challenges collectively rather than individually. Every decision, from the pacing of the herd to the allocation of resources, reflected an understanding that cooperation was central to survival. Even leisure activities reinforced teamwork. Cowboys often engaged in social games, storytelling, or music around the campfire, fostering camaraderie and trust. These activities provided emotional respite, strengthened bonds, and reinforced the social cohesion necessary for effective teamwork during the strenuous workday. Humor, teasing, and shared narratives also allowed cowboys to process stress and fatigue collectively, creating a sense of solidarity that supported both morale and operational effectiveness. Shared rituals and routines further reinforced teamwork. Daily tasks like feeding horses, tending to the herd, preparing meals, and maintaining equipment were coordinated through agreed-upon schedules and responsibilities. Everyone knew their role, and adherence to these routines ensured that operations ran smoothly. Deviations or failures in performing assigned tasks could have cascading effects on the group, emphasizing the interdependence of each member. Teamwork in this sense was not just about collaboration, but also about reliability, accountability, and mutual responsibility. The psychological aspect of teamwork was equally important. Cowboys faced stress, fatigue, and uncertainty every day, and the support of a reliable team helped buffer these pressures. Encouragement, shared knowledge, and collective decision-making reduced anxiety and enhanced confidence. Knowing that one was not alone in facing challenges allowed cowboys to focus on their immediate tasks, improving performance and resilience. Emotional endurance, therefore, was reinforced through social cohesion, shared responsibility, and the trust that each member would contribute to the collective effort. Cowboys' dependence on teamwork also extended to interactions with local communities and settlements. Navigating unfamiliar territory, finding supplies, and negotiating access to water or grazing land often required collaboration among riders and with locals. Experienced cowboys guided newcomers in these interactions, emphasizing tact, negotiation, and strategic communication. Success in these social networks contributed to the overall effectiveness of the trail team, demonstrating that teamwork was not limited to immediate herd management but encompassed broader survival strategies as well. The culture of teamwork was reinforced through shared identity and values. Cowboys often adhered to unspoken codes of conduct, emphasizing loyalty, fairness, mutual respect, and courage. These values governed interactions both within the team and in encounters with outsiders. Violating these norms could result in ostracism, conflict, or decreased trust, undermining the cohesion necessary for survival. Adherence to shared principles created a framework in which teamwork could thrive, allowing cowboys to operate effectively even under high-stress conditions. In practice, Successful teamwork on the trail was the result of a delicate balance of leadership, coordination, trust, communication, and adaptability. Each cowboy contributed skills, labor, and judgment, while the group as a whole coordinated strategies for herd management, survival, and navigation. The challenges of the trail, unpredictable terrain, harsh weather, limited supplies, and threats from both nature and humans made collaboration essential. Those who could work together efficiently, anticipate challenges, and rely on one another were far more likely to complete drives successfully and return home safely. The popular image of the cowboy often paints a picture of rugged individualism, romantic adventure, and thrilling encounters on the open plains. Movies, novels, and later television shows have solidified this vision, depicting cowboys as lone heroes, draped in leather, riding into sunsets, facing danger with effortless skill and charm. However, the reality behind the myth was far more complex, often grueling, and defined by endurance, cooperation, and survival under conditions that were unforgiving in every sense. While the legendary portrayals capture certain aspects of the cowboy spirit, the actual life of these men was shaped by routine hardship, environmental unpredictability, and a relentless demand for resourcefulness. Understanding the truth requires peeling back layers of cultural storytelling to reveal the practical, often harsh realities that cowboys faced every day. So next time you picture a cowboy riding across the plains, remember the real story behind the hat and boots, a story of survival, endurance, and sheer grit. Life on the trail was no easy ride, but these men carved out a place in history through courage and determination.